Good afternoon. My name is Valerian Bernard, and I am here with the Brahma Kumaris. It is my honor to be the co-chair of the Interfaith Liaison Committee, which is a committee between the faith movements that have been present at the COP for many years and the UNFCCC Secretariat. And this afternoon we are talking to you about an event that we organized on the first day of the COP on the 30th, which is called the Talanoa Dialogue. Talanoa Dialogues is something that happened in the Fiji Islands when the indigenous peoples are actually facing some complication. They have a Talanoa Dialogue so they can tell each other their stories and speak honestly about what is happening. It's based on 3 questions. Where are we at? Where are we going? And how do we get there? And so here we have 3 people with us who were present at the Interfaith Talanoa Dialogue, and they will tell us about the importance of faith in the conversation on climate change. It's my pleasure to introduce Sister Genti. She's the additional head of the additional administrative head of the Brahma Kumaris internationally, as well as the director for Europe and Middle East. The word is yours, Sister Genti.
Thank you very much, and lovely to see you all. Faith represents 85% of the world's population, and it's just fairly recently that faith has been given a good platform at the UN conferences. And so the Talanoa Dialogue brought together people of different faiths, and it was beautiful because I think there were things that we all underlined together, and that was the sanctity of nature, because all traditions, all faiths remind us of that. And of course, each one, not just from the perspective of their faith, but also from the perspective of their particular, their geographical background, spoke about how they're dealing with the emergency. And when you talk about faith, then you talk about things that are beyond what you can see physically now. And so we spoke about having hope for the future, creating resilience within, and how spirituality and faith helps us do this. And so it was very important and valuable to have different representatives speak about all of this. It gives you a perspective which is a bigger picture than just what I know or what my experience is. And so the Interfaith group does amazing work to bring people together in this way so that we can explore all the different dimensions of climate change and how it's impacting people from our communities. So it was extremely valuable. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sister Genti, for bringing the conversation to this room. We also have the presence here of our brother from the indigenous community. His name is Chebong Colonel, and he is representing the people that have been taking care of creation for so many generations here today. Please go ahead.
Thank you for this moment to share a little bit about the significance of the Indigenous presence here at COP28, the presence of Indigenous peoples at the Talanoa Dialogue. all of it is vital to the continuation of Indigenous ways of life. And this is something that we celebrated when we came together a few days ago to have this moment, which was actually an Indigenous structured conversation of communication, which we do not always see that in environments like this. So it was very powerful to our participants. And so we are very thankful for that inclusion, because it's in the essence of that storytelling mode that we were able to share some of the situations that we find ourselves in that are very unique to the communities of Indigenous peoples that we come from across the world, but they're also very similar. The issues of suffering violence and displacement, dispossession, all of which lead to climate disruption. The story is the same from region to region all across the world. And so one of the major concepts that we talked about was the communication. What is it like when we are in communication with those non-Indigenous entities? And our conversations kind of hovered around three different areas: communicating with governments, communicating with corporations, but also communicating with communities of faith. Because all of them have a choice. They can walk in solidarity with Indigenous peoples, but they also can walk in violence towards Indigenous peoples, countering some of the life systems that we support, our cosmology and our way of life. And so we were able to provide the participants an opportunity, Indigenous peoples an opportunity to share in the stories of what is it like and what would a healthy relationship be like. And so we're thankful for that. And so today we want to continue to ask for whatever mechanisms, whatever structures, to continue to assimilate to the various Indigenous styles of communicating all across the world, or else we have to come to terms that if we do not, we still are a part of a system that has historically done levels of violence to Indigenous peoples. Many of us have heard of some of the other concepts in the gatherings around the United Nations, the expert mechanisms, the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, other situations where we have heard of concepts of free, prior, and informed consent. Well, it's not always just about FPIC. What happens when we do not give consent? That's when we've seen the violence occur in some of our situations that has led to climate disruption, dispossession of territories, and all of those things that follow that. So my hope today is that Indigenous peoples, in recognizing our contributions to society and respecting our way of life and our right to live and the things that we carry, because the day is coming and we're getting very, very, how shall we say, tired, because we have shared dialogue after dialogue after dialogue, year after year after year, only to see none of our recommendations be taken seriously. And so my hope is that this dialogue will help us to do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. And I was supposed to interrupt you because of time, but what you were saying was so essential it was impossible.
Thank you.
So thank you for bringing such important points on the case of the situation and the human rights of the Indigenous peoples. The Talanoa dialogue also looks at the topic of human rights, and intergenerational justice is a big topic, as you know. And so you see from a panel from the Sokagakai International will now tell us about youth and the work that was done at the dialogue with youth and her work with youth. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak on behalf of youth and members of the younger generation. So in our dialogue, we acknowledge that within the processes of the UNFCCC, young people are a neglected group, but that young people are here and they are doing what they can to contribute to the processes, as well as working hard back home in their countries and communities to enhance and advance climate action. We acknowledge that there are a few youth here at COP who are from areas affected by conflict. Youth from Syria, Yemen, Afghanistan, Palestine, Ukraine, Brazil, Colombia, Pakistan, many others, who have overcome all number of challenges to be here and represent their countries. Challenges including the death of their friends and fellow youth who have been killed in these ongoing conflicts, youth climate activists on the front line of climate action doing amazing things for their countries with such bright and promising futures killed in these conflicts that they have just nothing to do with. Young people are the first to be sacrificed in wars and conflicts, and this has been a tragic reality throughout history that continues today. Many of these youth have come here risking their personal safety and security to tell their stories, and many cannot tell their stories, so for those that can tell their stories, we tell their stories for them. So as we gather here to discuss climate change, we cannot forget that children and youth suffering daily in conflict and war, and that environments are being destroyed in the process, their forests being burnt, their rivers being polluted, and their futures being destroyed. So we as members of the faith community stand by these youth, and we will not turn their backs on them, especially at COP.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for your vibrant passion on the work of youth. My pleasure to introduce a dear friend, Harjit Singh. He is one of the prominent figure in all the advocacy work. And one of the topics that we are all considering essential is the loss and damage, the finance for loss and damage, as well as the stock take. So we asked Arjit to tell us about that.
Thank you so much, Caroline, and my apologies for being slightly late. I was in another event and there's a lot of distance between the two places. So it's very clear when we talk about faith, all faiths have very clear reference of stewardship and how we cannot do any harm to people and the planet. But we see that happening all around us, and because of which we are seeing various disasters and climate impacts. And that's exactly the reason we, in this space, demanded a mechanism for loss and damage and having a very strong and robust system so that we can help people recover. So on the very first day of COP28, we got a decision that the loss and damage fund, which was agreed last year, is now going to be operationalized. And it's not enough because the kind of resources we need are now running into hundreds of billions of dollars. It is welcome that we are seeing countries coming forward and pledging in millions. That can help set up the fund, but it doesn't really go far enough to support communities who can rebuild their lives and recover their livelihoods. And this is where we now are spending our time in terms of making sure that some of the missing elements from the decision, such as scale, capitalization, and how it is connected with mitigation and adaptation are strongly referenced in the global stocktake as well as in the new collective quantified goal conversation. Because the reason we accepted that outcome on day one, it was suboptimal, a lot more near to be done, but we also realized that the kind of political investment that happened over the last few years, we needed to make sure that there is this fund which is now being operationalized. And we look at it from faith perspective, we look at it from justice perspective. We have to talk about how we are going to make sure that those people who are facing these crises are supported. And we all stand for care, compassion, humanity, and faith community has played a very important role in putting a spotlight on this issue, and we have come this far, and of course we would like to see faith community with us. Now that justice is going to be delivered when we demand more money and actual implementation happens, money going to people who it is intended for. So I would say it is just a beginning, and we need to now make sure that this fund is fit for purpose, and some of the elements that we are really expecting, such as global stocktake, to really live up to its promise of scaling up ambition, not only talking about loss and damage, which is important, but also mitigation. We can't keep burning fossil fuels and expect that we will be able to deal with the challenge. We have to stop burning fossil fuels. We have to help people to adapt and prepare and support them when they are affected. Thank you. Thank you so much, Harjit. And this Talanoa dialogue is also the frame in which we allow 150 people were connected, were present physically or online. And we heard everybody's voice, they heard each other, and on this basis we gathered, we harvested the thoughts of everyone. And with this we are going to write a call, the call of the Interfaith Talanoa dialogue in Dubai, and we will deliver it to the COP, the UNFCCC, as well as the presidency. So this is now open to questions. Raise your hand, and I think there are mics that can walk in your direction if you do. So I think someone has a question there. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Nick Perry. I'm from AFP. Could you please elaborate a little bit more for those of us that are not familiar with the history of faith and religious groups at COP? If you can give us a bit more of an idea about how that role has evolved over time and at this COP, how you see that role playing out and why it's important. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start, and if someone wants to add, please do. In Rio, this was the original conference where the work on climate change and desertification and another convention actually took place. And so in Rio, they decided that there would be main constituencies, and somehow faith wasn't one. And so since then, actually I was in Rio, so there were faith there. Many of us were there, but we were there we didn't think of becoming a constituency somehow. And since then and before then, the faith have always been humanitarian actors, looking into disasters, but also activists into advocacy, also educating people about what climate change and desertification and environment and the connection between people, the processes of business and the processes of government and governance happen. So a quick answer, maybe someone I'm sure could add tons of things, but I don't know.
I think a turning point was around 2014 because different organizations were present anyway. But in 2014, in a meeting with Christiana Figueres, who was the executive secretary at that time, she suggested that we meet with her chief of staff. And he then said, is it possible for me to meet the different faith actors who are around? And then it was Valeriane who was there in that meeting, and she then got together the faith communities. And so this particular group, the Interfaith Liaison Committee, was formed. And at that time, Christiana Figueres' call for a summit of faith leaders in New York led to a very big meeting in New York in which she was present herself. And she said that the voice of faith is important because of the values it brings, and those values are consistent and universal and eternal and have to be represented. And then this year, it's been beautiful because UNFCCC actually hosted at the Innovation Hub a gathering of faith leaders. So I think this was now a new step. Between 2015 and now, all the different environmental groups started inviting faith leaders to their programs, their side events, which again was another step in between. But now I think there's an actual recognition of the power of faith leaders.
Thank you very much, Sister Genti. Is there another question?
Thank you. My question is to the panel that we've seen the history from 2014 and faith organizations have been integrated in the process. What are your expectations? Were your expectations met from 2014 to 2023? And taking this forward, how do you see the best optimal outcome from the perspective of faith leaders in climate negotiations?
Thank you very much. It's a very good question. I think it would be good to allow many of you to speak. So I don't think you have much time, but you could probably take a minute each.
My vision is that faith leaders will take central platform because I feel that it's only through spirituality and values that consciousness changes, and it's a change of consciousness and mindset that's needed, not just money and technology.
If I may add, I think the kind of trust people have in various faiths, and they respect their leaders, they listen to them, and also the political leaders, do and they must do listen to faith leaders, and that's what we need, because we need to actually have that consciousness, and also alongside those policies, consciousness will help change those policies, and that's what is needed right now. All faiths call for care, compassion, no harm to the planet, justice for people, equality. So these are the common messages and beliefs that we have, and how we can get faith community, and the way we have seen faith community getting a lot more engaged, especially those institutions who have been working on ground on developmental activities, have actually witnessed how climate change is affecting people. And they come here with that message and that call, and that puts a lot of pressure in providing that ethical and moral argument, and then putting pressure on the governments to act and people to come together. So I think that's very powerful, and I do see a very important role of faith communities so far and going forward.
Thank you, Harjit. Karen?
Sorry. No, it is our hope that in some way, that the values that our faith systems carry of respect and generosity, compassion, can somehow influence and change the trajectory of an extractive society. So we can only enhance that relationship with whatever entities that we are in communication with by being together. So it is a step in the right direction when we see an emphasis on faith communities coming and communicating with those elected officials or officials from wherever they may come from.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. We have another question after you've answered, Lucy.
Just a quick one. So young people, faith in particular, are really finding their voice in this process, I would say. At COP27, they had the first Interfaith youth event with the UNFCCC. To be honest, young people of faith feel frustrated with the pace of climate ambition from the faith communities, and are really wanting to share that frustration, but not in an unconstructive way. Young people are really calling for more intergenerational dialogue, friendships, and collaboration to really strengthen and advance and enhance climate action.
And you've worked on some negotiations of your own, haven't you? I think some of the youth in our group were mentioning about that. I think there is another question.
Thank you so much. I'm Friday from Nigeria, Niger Delta. Well, my question is very simple, but it looks very, very critical. When I came to the COP, I see that what is here is top-bottom approach. I think the leaders are just here discussing, engaging themselves, networking themselves, sometimes eating, living in a very comfortable AC and good environment. And what about the marginalized people? What about the local people who are living in OSP, who are living in pollution, who pollution have stolen their fathers, pollution have stolen their children, pollution have killed day by day. These people live in flooding environment. They live in disaster. They live in climate change.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If this is a question, do you want an answer?
Yeah. The question is, now we are talking about...
We just have 3 minutes left.
Oh, good.
That's why I'm saying
Let me just 30 seconds now. Now, in summary, we are now discussing a way out for the loss and damage funding. What can we do? How can we do it to ensure that this funding we are talking about can be sent down to the local community, not city? For example, if you say you award small funding or grant for Nigeria, it will not remain in Abuja. It will not remain in Lagos. It can go down to that local environment that need the demand we are asking for. Thank you. That's my question.
Thank you for bringing them in the room. Thank you so much, really, brother. Thank you. Who would like to reply?
I can respond. Absolutely valid question. And some of us who have been fighting for it, we are not fighting for this money to just go to government. It's for people. You're absolutely right. And that's what we have to do. But what we have won in this process, for the first time, we have ensured that communities can access the money directly from the loss and damage fund. This is a provision. Now details are going to be worked out next year. So please engage with that process. When this framework is going to be defined next year, when board starts outlining the processes and what we need to do back home in our own countries, in the developing world and everywhere, to have a stronger civil society to set those accountability mechanisms so that we demand that accountability at all levels. So this money is not for government, it's for people, and we also have a responsibility to make sure that we hold our governments to account, that money reaches them, for whom we are fighting in this space. So that's also our role, to hold them account.
Thank you so much, Harjit, for your passionate answer to this passionate, important question. It's a faith moment. Let's have a moment of silence. We have 30 seconds left. Thank you for your presence, your engagement, and thanks to the panelists for their important remarks.
Yeah, I'll wait for Joe.